Hi, everyone. I was in Clara's chat this morning, and she said something that made me just go, yeah, I haven't been on in a while. Um, I lost my oomph to do these videos, even just talking. And then I started to get it back, I want to say the beginning of March. But then something happened on St. Patty's Day. In previous videos, I've talked about a friend named Daenerys. Her name is actually Dawn, but she really liked Daenerys from Game of Thrones, and Daenerys was the mother of dragons, and Dawn felt she was the mother of meows because at one point she had like 7 cats, and you know, um, I've known her for over 20 years. We had arguments and broke up and got back together, and then arguments and broke up and got back together. And um Dawn was very, very sick. She was going to dialysis every day. um she had diabetes. um she got a sore on her foot, and the doctors and nurses that were taking care of it kept telling her, it looks good, it looks good, it looks good. The last time they told her it looked good, she sent me a picture of it. It was yellow and green and black. And I don't mean like the blood was just so caked up. It was so dark it looked black. No, it was black. Within that next week, they told her, well, your foot isn't actually getting better, and we're going to have to take it, amputate it. So she went to the hospital, and in the hospital, they started discussing whether or not they were going to just take her foot or take her foot and ankle. It was finally decided they were going to take her foot and ankle, but while she was going through the operation, they actually took up to her knee. She was in a rehab facility for that because she had to learn how to get in and out of a wheelchair. She had to build up um, her muscles in order to do this. And there were problems in the rehab with the care she was getting, and she was still going back and forth to the hospital, which, from what she said, the hospital was next door to her rehab. So it wasn't much to get her there. Over the process of these last couple of years, something went wrong with her eye. It got to the point she couldn't see out of it. And then I don't know how she noticed, but one day she noticed the eye wasn't even open. She was getting injections in her eye because they were trying to save her eye. And they said, in all probability, she was never going to be able to use the eye again. She kept having problems with her dialysis port, which was in her arm. They had to keep taking it out and putting it in, and taking it out and putting it in. They weren't supposed to, but however they were putting it in, it wasn't stable. And then there were times they had to take it out and redo it. Also, she noticed she wasn't able to properly use her arm anymore, the arm that the port was in. So, all this stuff, she was having problems with her memory, which, you know when something's wrong. And when you can't remember just because you can't remember, or you can't remember because something's wrong. She felt like there was something wrong. Don't know. This is just more of what she was going through. I spoke to her March 16th. She was looking forward to have corned beef and cabbage on St. Patty's Day. She talked about a couple of other things she was making. And we had started doing this thing where we'd give each other 5 movies that we had seen, whether we enjoyed it or not. We would, give each other the titles, and then we would go and watch them. And I remember her saying something about the last list I gave her because Jurassic Park 3 was on it, and she's not really a dinosaur kind of chick. But she had watched part 2 and she had seen part 1 years ago. She said part 2 was okay. It was actually better than part 1. And when she heard Jurassic Park 3, she literally was like, oh, good Lord. But she was actually looking forward to getting through the list, and because we both had this love of movies. She was more of a cinephile than I am. I mean, if you ask me about directors and cinematographers, and I don't know that. I mean, if you were to ask me what's my favorite Steven Spielberg movie, I would say Jaws. But that has less to do with Steven Spielberg than it does the shark, the storyline, the actors, and how it all just came together. It has more to do with that than, oh, it's Steven Spielberg. But she would understand that. Anyway, on St. Patty's Day, she went to dialysis, and she had an allergic reaction to a medication. She went into cardiac arrest, and she was literally dead for 10 minutes. They brought her back. but she was in a coma. They had her on a ventilator. A week after that, her husband called me to give me an update. They thought she could breathe on her own. They thought she was getting a little bit better. They took the ventilator tube out of her and they had to immediately put it back in. She couldn't breathe on her own. The arm that she was having problems with and couldn't really move, and it was the arm with the dialysis port in it. And after a week of being in the hospital, the entire arm turned black. There were like little hints of red and blue color in the arm, but not her skin tone. So the doctors said, we're going to have to amputate her arm. They said for her being gone for 10 minutes, they know she was going to have brain damage, but they didn't know to what extent. They didn't think she'd be able to speak ever again. Uh, they didn't know if she'd remember anyone or anything. And they didn't know if she'd be able to recognize things, um, like basic brain function. Would she understand her her glasses? Would she understand what a cat is? Would she understand, just simple things like that? Her life was never, ever going to be any sense of normal. And she had been saying over the past year, if they want to take another body part from her, she doesn't want to live. She already felt like she was a burden on her husband, who, she couldn't get out of bed at this point. When she was in rehab, she could get in and out of bed, into her chair, go where she wanted to go. But because the hospital bed she bought was an old fashioned one, something about the height, it wasn't where she could slide across the board and get into the wheelchair. It just wasn't happening. So she was bedridden. Her husband had to wash her, which, I don't know, there were a lot of problems with that too. And hearing a week after, um, she went back into the hospital, I was hearing all this stuff, and I was like, she's better off dead. She is not going to want to come back and be more of a burden. She is not going to want to come back and not have an arm. She never regained consciousness. And I want to say, like, 3 days after that update, she passed away. that was um I want to say around the 24th, 25th of March. So I haven't really done much of anything videos wise until I heard all the stuff with Farm and Nancy Bishop, Lonnie, and Beautiful One. I thought about doing a video about Kim Zolciak and Candy Burris. Candy Burris is going through a divorce, and Kim Zolciak just lost custody of her kids temporarily because she was supposed to do these classes court ordered, and she decided to go to Europe instead. But I haven't had the oomph. I barely talk in chats anymore. I just, but yeah, that's why I lost a friend that I had for over 20 years. Yeah, it was on and off, but friends argue, they fight, for as close as we were. She used to live here. So we had met in real life other than online. Uh we hung out together, and at the point we had just gotten back to, we were talking almost every single day on the phone for hours and hours and hours. And yeah, so I'm gonna get back into the swing of things of doing videos. It might not be as many as I've done in the past. It's still going to be a here or there type of thing. If I feel like it, I will. If I don't, I won't. But that's just what's been going on. Okay, bye.